Okay, this is the next part of our Into the Jungle book. It's called Baloo's Courage. Mowgli sat with his chin on his knees, his back against the elephant's foot, stunned into stillness. Bagheera never told me he had a sister, he said. I tell him everything. He tells very few things to very few people, said Rapi. It is his way. And the elephant, said Mowgli. That was you, wasn't it? Rapi ran the tip of her trunk through Mowgli's shock of hair. Perhaps, little frog, now tell me, how are your lessons? Mowgli was just opening his mouth to reply when he heard a rustling in the undergrowth. He sniffed the air. It was unmistakably his mother. Raksha was moving fast, and there was a smell in the air of fury or fear. All thoughts of Bagheera disappeared. Mowgli grabbed a vine in both fists and began to shin up it. He pumped his legs back and forth to make it swing, then launched himself towards another, higher vine. He made a hurry salute to Rapi as he tumbled through the air. Then he grabbed the vine in both hands and disappeared into the safety of the leaves. Far, far above, high on a rock above the canopy, a pair of red eyes watched him go. 1 hour later, the great bear Baloo was sitting by the river, teaching the youngest litter of wolf cubs a lesson in rat, when Mowgli crashed down from the green curtain overhead. He landed panting at the bear's jaws and butted Baloo in his furry stomach. Come and play, old bear, he said. I've got stories to tell you. Baloo gently batted Mowgli away with the side of his head. I'm teaching. Come and join the lesson, Mowgli, or leave us be for now. I'll join the lesson, Mowgli was in a strutting, peacocking mood. I can show them how it's done. Very well, said Baloo. Mowgli, how do you say, I am grateful for your help in rat? Why would I ever have to say that? Mowgli laughed. When are the rats ever going to help me? Without warning, Baloo's vast, rough-padded paw swept out and knocked Mowgli across the chest. Mowgli was bowled backwards, heels over head, and lay in the dirt, looking up at the treetops. They were spinning. He scrambled to his feet, unhurt but furious. What was that for? He asked. What did I do? By the great ape, Wolfling, the words of the jungle are not a subject to joke about. I do not teach for my own amusement. I teach because it matters more than anything else. You didn't have to hit me, said Mowgli, but Baloo merely turned his great back and went on teaching the younger wolves. As Mowgli stood, spitting rage and humiliation and dirt, Akela stepped out of the grass. He had been watching the cubs as they learned. It is a pack leader's job to know the strengths and fooleries of every newborn wolf. Come with me, man-child. Leave the cubs. Mowgli dusted himself off and turned his nose up at the old bear's back. I'm going with Akela, said Mowgli loudly. We're going to discuss important things without you. Akela did not turn round to look at the boy, merely led the way to the council rock. Akela was growing white around the eyes and muzzle, and he grew leaner by the year. His spine rose and fell like a mountain range as he prowled onward. Mowgli's blood was still hot and itchy in his veins, but by the time they reached the rock, his rage had abated just enough for him to swing up into the trees for a clutch of bananas. He glanced down to make sure Akela was watching, and then turned a few somersaults to show he was unconcerned. Far above, on the outcrop of rock, the red eyes took note of the speed of the man-cub's limbs and the wild whip of his head as he spun in mid-air, knees tucked tight against his chest, unaware of being watched. Mowgli shimmied down the tree again, peeled a banana with his toes, and ate it in two still slightly grumpy mouthfuls. Akela waited until the boy stopped huffing and fell still. Did anyone ever tell you, he asked, about how Baloo came to be your teacher? About how he came to be the guide of all the young cubs, in fact, of all the jungle? No? Mowgli picked a tick out of the crook of his elbow and bit it defiantly. And I don't care about that stupid old bear. It's a story worth hearing, said Akela. There was something flinty in the old wolf's eyes, something that said it would be better not to refuse. Fine. Mowgli peeled another banana and lay on his back, looking up at the wolf's muzzle. Tell me, he said. Akela lay down on the hot rock and scratched himself luxuriously with his hind leg. Oh, cat's come in the way. Molly, move. Move. Sorry about that. Oh, now there's a cat fight going on. I'll just carry on. This story begins when Baloo was a fairly small and very fluffy cub. Baloo was not, by any stretch of the imagination, an elegant bear, said Arkela. He was larger than his brothers, round-eyed and slow-pawed and clumsy. He shed fur everywhere. He was unnervous and unwary, lax and slack, and the kind to eat his own toenails. The other bears were not very patient with him. Baloo was not a peaceful cave companion. Even as a newborn cub, before he first opened his eyes, he snuffled and sang and imitated the sounds around him. He mimicked the voice of the red parrot and the green. He copied the snores of his father and the grunts of his siblings as they ate. Baloo, his mother would say, will you be quiet before I bite my own whiskers off? Quiet, his father would roar, his fur standing on end with exhaustion, or we'll send you off to the ancient ape up the mountain. We're trying to sleep. Nobody noticed how perfectly Baloo's snores and hoots were pitched, and how very closely they matched the original. By the time he was a year old, Baloo was a ball of fur who chewed his claws and played on his own. The other cubs didn't mean to be cruel exactly, but nor did they mean to be kind. Baloo was liable to mistime his happiness and barge into the other cubs while they were eating, and when they groomed one another, he bit too hard. One bright morning at the foot of the Seoni Hills, 3 of Baloo's cousins and 2 of his brothers were playing outside the cave. The game involved running in circles and trying to catch the stumpy tail of the bear in front of you. Baloo woke and heard the joyful growls coming from outside. He came galloping out of the cave and threw himself into the circle. He caught his left front claw under a root and went headlong into the bear in front, who crashed into his cousin in front of him. The bears rolled into a pile of fur and teeth. There was a certain amount of spitting. Baloo! Ow, don't, that's my nose. Sorry, said Baloo. Sorry. Baloo's brother, Oars, rolled his top lip back to show his teeth. Baloo would find a way to trip over his own paws, even if he was a fish. The cubs laughed and stamped their hind legs on the ground. Baloo's face creased. Fish don't have paws, he said. Oars sighed. I know, that's why it's funny. Baloo sat up and tried to nonchalantly extract some leaf mould from his eye. I'd still like to play, he said, if you explain the rules. No, we're busy. Just go home. Just go home. Baloo looked around the clearing. This is my home. Then go somewhere else. Baloo laughed uncertainly. You're joking. We're not, said Oars. Leave us alone. When you are told to leave someone alone, Baloo discovered, the person who invariably feels most alone is you. Baloo tried to look jaunty as he set off through the green jungle, but his heart was so low he was sure he could feel it dragging on the forest floor. He tugged his heart and legs along until he found a large rock in a clearing. It had trapped the warmth of the sun in its grey embrace. He lay down with his back against it and closed his eyes. Then he opened them. Something was trying to eat his eyebrows. He scrambled up and rose on his hind legs, trying to look ferocious. He bared his teeth and stared around at the sky, then into the trees, then down at the ground. A very small creature was staring up at him. Baloo didn't pay much attention to any animal that wasn't at least as big as his own head. This creature could barely cover a quarter of his forepaw. It had the face and body of a mouse, but with oversized back legs like a rabbit's, which allowed it to jump as high as a grown human's waist. It had vast ears waving like an elephant's in the breeze. A jerboa, Baloo thought. He'd seen a few near the lake, though none had ever tried to chew his fur before. It squeaked. Baloo blinked. I don't understand, Oh, hang on. Have we missed a thing? No. I don't understand, he said. It is important to remember that back in the years that Baloo was young, the large animals of the jungle did not speak the languages of the smaller. Most bears could speak wolf, tiger, panther, elephant, but anything else they regarded as nonsense. Hideous squeaking, they would say, makes my ears ache. Likewise, the smaller mammals, the mice and rats and squirrels, did not learn tiger or wolf. This was largely because they didn't have the chance to get close enough without being eaten. So Baloo stared at the jerboa. It squeaked again. Its tiny eyes looked kind, and Baloo found himself more than usually in need of kindness that day. So Baloo squeaked back. He tried to imitate the exact squeak of the gerbil. The gerbil squeaked again. This time it was clear that she was laughing. She turned and squeaked into the bushes nearby, and 3 more gerbils appeared, their ears flapping inquisitively. Baloo tried the gerbil's squeak again. Although he did not know it at the time, his squeak was not an accurate one. As in all languages, there are words in Jerboa that sound very similar but mean very different things. The Jerboa had said, "Hello, what's wrong?" Baloo had said, "Constipation, what's smelling?" But it was a beginning, and a beginning is a precious thing, as delicate and fragile as a newborn starling. The Jerboa gestured at herself and then at Baloo and tipped her head to one side in the way that means, in every language, both animal and human, "What are you called?" Baloo growled his name. As best she could, the Jerboa growled it back. Bear is a fairly simple language, so her effort wasn't in fact that bad. "Boola," she growled. The growl was so high-pitched and foreign that Baloo wanted to laugh, but he contained himself. He pointed at the Jerboa. "Jolt," she said. "Jolt," said Baloo. He pointed at a nearby stone. "Rock," he growled. "Rock," the Jerboas squeaked in Bear. Baloo pointed at the rock again and then at the Jerboas and raised his eyebrows in a question. "Rock," they squeaked in Jerboa. Baloo tried to raise his voice in a squeak. "Ork," he growled. "Ork." The Jerboas thumped their feet in applause. Baloo smiled. He felt something prickle on his tongue. It was, he thought, language, struggling to be born, or possibly a stray ant. Okay, let's stop there. Molly's joined us today, along with the other one. Okay, I'll see you next time.